All right, you guys have already taken a look at different products throughout history. You've taken a look at a few different, mostly electronics that have been developed throughout the last 20, 30 years of your lifetimes, and you've seen and discussed kind of how those, who still uses those. I mean, when you look at flip phones, everyone these days is moving towards smartphones, but there are still some people who rely on flip phones primarily, and that's perfectly okay. I mean, there's different types of people, and different types of people use different types of technologies, and in fact, you're going to learn about some of those different distinctions in the next slideshow. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about designers, which is going to be your role in life, hopefully, and their relationship to the product cycle, or the cycle that which all products go through. Now, you probably kind of figured out yesterday or before, as we were talking about the different products, they go through different stages. In the product cycle, there's primarily 4 stages that you need to address. Introduction is where a product first comes onto the market and people are first starting to get to use it, see what it looks like. This is kind of like the bleeding edge stuff. That's brand new. Then there's growth, in which people are starting to adopt to using the product, and it becomes more and more popular. Maturity is where it starts to kind of level off a little bit. That is where a lot of the people who are using the technology already have it. And then there's decline, in which people will stop using a technology in favor of something else, or in favor of nothing at all. So that there's these four stages are what you need to know about for the product life cycle. Now, as a designer, designing is part of the product cycle. As a need is generated, a product is designed, made, sold, and eventually becomes obsolete. What's important to realize is there's the design cycle, and then there's the product cycle. Now, the design cycle usually occurs before the product hits the market. The product cycle is when the product is, after the product gets to market, how does it behave at that point? So the designer has a direct role on the design cycle, not necessarily on the product cycle. The product cycle is something that is dictated by the market and by the production companies. So it's the product cycle can get pretty complicated. For example, if a product uses a particular material in its production, and maybe the supply of that material runs out, then you need to change the product, and something might happen in the design, or people might not accept the new design, but it's what's required to be done. There's a lot of people that have an impact on the product cycle, but primarily the designer has a direct hand in the design cycle, and then a little bit of an effect on the product cycle. Now, as a designer, you can get more involved in things with new advances in technology, 3D printing, computer-aided design, and also computer-aided manufacturing, or CAM. CAM is just kind of an old lingo for what is now known as CNC and 3D printing. So CAM is like a broad, all-encompassing term that just refers to using robotic tools to do a lot of the manufacture. These technologies actually make it pretty neat for the designer, because the designer can come up with a design, they can do concept sketches like you see here, then get it into software, and then use these automated machines to actually produce the first prototypes, or in some cases do a production run of a product. So that takes a lot of people out of the picture in terms of producing a product. It can come to market much faster, and in some cases that's not necessarily a good thing, because it can come to market without a whole lot of input from other people. Outline the product cycle in terms of early, mature, and late stages of development. Now, in the early stages of the product cycle, a lot of times there are revisions that occur. The first generation of customers might say that something needs to be changed about it, and this actually happens a lot in the video game industry, or really any software, because software is unique in that with the internet these days, a company can actually release a product, or a software in this case. They can release a product not completely finished, and they will actually be able to patch it after the fact, and this has actually gotten some companies into kind of a lot of PR trouble when they release buggy software and then say, oh, we'll just rely on patches to fix it. Well, a lot of customers kind of get sick of that pretty quickly. So changes really occur in the early stages. By the time you get into the mature stage, the product is diffused into the market. A lot of people are using it. A lot of people know what it is. It's gained acceptance and it sells pretty well. When smartphones first took off, well, they didn't really take off. When smartphones first hit the market, they didn't get a whole lot of acceptance because at the time they were kind of big and clunky. And people didn't like them because of the size, and now they've really matured, and people are using them all the time. So these new phones have kind of entered into the mature stage. Now, if you look at it in the introduction stage, in the beginning, the audience that you're approaching is going to be a small audience of early adopters, people who are really into it at the beginning. That's pretty low. The cost is going to be of the item, usually if at the beginning stages, can be fairly high. There's going to be low competition because no one else is aware of it, no one else is doing anything with it. And at that point, the focus of the business is to generate awareness of their product. And the focus of the designer is to tune it and make everything work pretty well. In the growth stage, you have the mainstream audience that is starting to get involved. The market's growing. There's usually a lot more sales. Competition starts to appear. And then at that point, the business focus is to get a market share, make more sales, just improve your sales and make more money. If that's your goal. The design focus at that point would be to scale production up to meet the demand. At the mature stages, then you get the late adopters, people who are a little apprehensive about getting into any new technology. They'll usually buy in the maturity stage after something has been out there for a little bit. At that point, you have a pretty large market, but it's starting to flatten out because you're basically saturating the market. Everyone who wants your product probably already has one at that point. There's a high competition because the competition has probably seen how much results you're getting out of that, and they've started jumping on board. At that point, the business focus is retaining your customers, and the design focus is supporting those customers. Then at the end, you have the declining phase. At that point, those are people who get into it right at the very end. They use the term laggards here, but another term might be people who are looking for something for maybe cost effectiveness, because you can buy at the time that I'm recording this, the iPhone 6 just came out. So that's the new iPhone technology. People can buy iPhone 5 still, and actually the price for those is probably going to drop in the next couple of weeks because the new 6s are going to be coming out soon. So people who buy into an iPhone 5 at this point aren't necessarily laggards. They might look at the technology and say, okay, I'm just going to buy it when the cost comes down. And the decline phase is usually when that happens. At that point, the market is shrinking. Your sales are moderate. Your competition is moderate as other competitors have left the market. And then the business focus is to transition away from that product, and the design focus is to help customers transition away to the next line. There are a lot of products are at different stages in the product cycle. Let's take a look at the ballpoint pen. The ballpoint pen, which is one of the pictures that you saw in the last presentation, that's something that's been around for 100 years. I mean, it's been around a long time. It sells well. The design doesn't really change too much because it's a very simple design. It's very efficient. It's very cheap, and people have come to accept it. Cassette tapes, for example, those have pretty much been completely wiped out. They're a small design. They're very inexpensive, but there are many products have come that have been more efficient and of higher quality. So those things have been kind of pushed to the wayside. While the ballpoint pen is older than the cassette tape, it still sticks around. Take a look at different types of products. You have inductive chargers, inductive charging systems. Those are the new the power mats is really what they are being able to charge a cell phone or any device just by setting it on a mat. That's kind of a niche product there. Not a whole lot of people would necessarily need one or want one. USB drives, well, they've been around for probably at least 10, 15 years. But their use is starting to decline as internet connections get faster and faster and faster, and the ability to save things online or to the cloud improved, so there isn't so much of a need for USB drives. DVDs, those really got popular probably starting around 1996. They started tapering off a few years thereafter. Now, the only people I know who use DVDs are to burn files to them from a computer, and they're using them more for data, not so much for videos. Blu-ray is another technology that's going to kind of go to the way of DVD. Everything's getting replaced as far as media storage by online stuff. So it's a lot more convenient for someone to just select a video from a menu rather than dig out a disc and stick it into a player. The 20-ounce plastic bottle, those things are everywhere. You see them all over the place. The design is very simple. Do you guys think those are going by the way? I mean, do you think those are going out? Because there's a big push to conserve resources, and those aren't exactly the most efficient of things. So it's usually an easy delivery mechanism, but maybe there's something on the horizon that would replace something like that. Like I said before, the design cycle and the product cycle. The product cycle occurs after the design cycle. The design cycle occurs when a designer is coming up with a product, whereas the product cycle occurs after the product has already been developed and it hits the market. For some products, the product cycle is shortened, sometimes very dramatically. That occurs when there's either a lot of competition or it's a very limited time, a limited use for the product. For example, laptop computers and cell phones are highly competitive. There's thousands of those particular products out there, so companies need to adapt or they lose their market share very quickly. At the other end of the spectrum, like I said, ballpoint pens, there's not a whole lot of variation between them. So if you take a look at a cell phone, how long is the product cycle for a cell phone? Well, when you think about it, about 2 years, because that's exactly the length of the contracts for cell phone providers in the U.S. And usually their primary method of retaining customers is to give them a free cell phone. So it's pretty predictable that cell phones are going to last about 2 years for a lot of consumers. Computers. According to Moore's law, the technology required to go so fast with a computer will double in about 18 months for the same price. So computers have a limited lifespan. Cars tend to last a little bit longer. A lot of people can keep their cars for 10 years or more. Buses, even longer than that. The same technology applies, though. I mean, as it increases, people will want to get more efficient vehicles. Airplanes are kind of neat when you think about it. The best-selling jet airplane of all time is the Boeing 737, and that was developed back in 1967. And there's still people who are using those things. Televisions, again, they're more expensive than a lot of cell phones. They're a bigger part of the technology that is in a lot of homes, but it is something that kind of grows and changes very quickly. So there's quite a bit of competition in the television market. Now you got the ultra high definition things and 3D televisions that no one really ever wanted to use because they give you a migraine when you use them. There's all sorts of technologies that come out that don't get very popular, don't catch on, and they never really get a market share. But the product cycle is different for every product, and it really depends on the type of product, the product category, and the market that's involved.